Evening, everybody. So we'll go ahead and say a happy Thanksgiving because I probably won't see many of you tomorrow. So hope it goes well. Everybody got their turkey? Is it thawed out? Okay. I guess you start cooking it tonight? I don't know really how it works. Because it takes a long time to cook a turkey, right? Unless you're frying it.
3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4, oh, okay. I heard something like real men fry their turkeys. I don't know if that's a thing or not. I know fried turkey's good. Better than the other one. Okay. 2 Peter, chapter number 2. We're on verse number 15. Still talking about these false teachers. This is a big deal in the first century church. It's a big deal for the church to be able to recognize false teachers and to deal with them. So this is why this is not the only place that gets dealt with it. In the New Testament, Paul talks about it. John talks about it. Peter talks about it. It's a big deal. So 15 and 16, what we're going to get here are some more clues confirming that these false teachers were Christians. They were members of the church. And we've already talked about that. Before, starting with verse number 1 of this chapter, 2 Peter 2. Because remember, verse number 1, the first accusation against them, I guess, or one of the first, was that they denied the Lord who bought them. And we talked about how that word bought is very similar to redeemed by the Lord, and only Christians are those who can actually say that they've been redeemed. Okay. So let's read 15 and 16 again. It says, they, with the eyes full of adultery, right, 14, they're enticing unstable souls. They have hearts trained in covetous practices. They are accursed children. So those folks have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But he was rebuked for his iniquity. A dumb donkey, speaking with a man's voice, restrained the madness of the prophet. All right, so you see those clue words. They have forsaken the right way. They have gone astray. There's one, literally, it means they left the straight way. These teachers did. They're Christians. You're right? You got to be on the straight way to leave it. That makes sense to us. Now, in case, I want to run through the story of Balaam real quick, just for a refresher. I'm sure that a lot of folks, this is one of the Old Testament stories that even if you don't know where it is, you're probably, I remember that one. It's because something very extraordinary happens with Balaam. So this is in the book of Numbers, chapter 22, 23, and 24. It goes all the way through there. And so Balaam here is used as an example of someone who had kind of the same spirit of greediness, or this same spirit of covetousness that these false teachers had. So back in Numbers, while Israel is wandering through the wilderness, they're on their way to the promised land, they occasionally had to stop and they had to fight. They had to fight for their passageway through, and they had to fight against people who didn't like them very much. And so at this time in the book of Numbers, they had defeated a people called the Amorites, and the Moabite king heard about them defeating the Amorites, and he got a little scared. If they defeated them, they're definitely going to come over here, and the Israelites are going to defeat me too. So he finds a man named Balaam, who was a prophet. It seems that he was a prophet of God. And he wants Balaam to curse Israel. And Balaam, God basically says, remember, this is the short version. If you want to get the long version, Numbers 22 through 24. Balaam, God says, no, Balaam, you're not going to do it. You're not going to curse Israel. These are my people. So Balaam relays that message to the king. No, I can't do it. I can only do what God tells me to do. The king sends more messengers to Balaam after this, after hearing no, because, some people won't take no for an answer, right? And he tells Balaam, I will honor you greatly. That's 22:17 numbers, which means, what do you think that means? What do you think he means by it? Balaam? I know God doesn't want you to curse Israel, but if you will just curse Israel, I will honor you greatly. All right, he's just going to pay him a lot he's going to just give him money. Tons of money, give him all the possessions that he wants, and that's evident in the context of the story. And so Balaam, again, he says, no, I can't do it. But he goes and asks God about it, knowing that God has already said, no, you can't curse God. And so we're getting the idea that Balaam really wanted God to say yes, because he really wanted to be honored greatly. He was really wanting his reward. God gets angry with Balaam, and God uses an angel and Balaam's donkey that he was riding, basically to show him his wrongs. Balaam, you can't be acting like this. This is not right, okay? And of course, that's the short version. Balaam starts talking with a man's voice and all of that. And the idea that Peter is bringing up here, he's bringing up Balaam, is to show that these false teachers are walking in the greedy steps of Balaam. Now, if you look at verse 16 again, it says Balaam was rebuked for his iniquity. And then he could have just put a period right there and just kind of skipped to verse 17. But he didn't. He has to he brings up the donkey. Now, why do you think that is? He could have said, but he loved the wages of unrighteousness, just like these greedy false teachers. But he was rebuked for his iniquity, just like what's going to happen to these false teachers. They're not going to get away with it. And then he brings up the dumb donkey.
With the donkey, giving him warnings, and
okay.
The same thing. God had done for them. He had warned them. Peter's warning, but they won't listen.
Yeah. What does it say that about Balaam, that the donkey was actually speaking seemed to have more wisdom? What's that say about Balaam? Kind of acting like it. Yeah. Well, I guess we could say that this particular donkey was definitely not acting dumb, right? But the idea is that here's why I think he's bringing up the donkey is because Balaam being kind of rebuked by a dumb animal, right? An animal that normally doesn't talk. An animal that's also appearing to have far more sense and far more wisdom and far more discernment than the person and the human being who is actually riding this donkey is about as low and as humiliating as it can get for a person. And this is the position that these false teachers were in, whether they realized it or not. So Balaam's madness, Peter says, his madness was restrained, it was exposed, and it was restrained. And God was going to do the same thing to these teachers. If we were to read a little bit further in the book of Numbers to chapter 31, you will find that Balaam counseled this Moabite king to kind of trick Israel into sinning against God, and he did it with sexual immorality. That was one way that I suppose that the Moabite king could get God to stop blessing Israel, get Israel to start sinning. And that's exactly what happened if you read the rest of what happened. And they started doing exactly that with women they shouldn't have been doing things with, which goes right along with the kinds of sins that these false teachers were in. Isn't that right? And then you find out in Numbers 31 that Balaam is killed by Israel. So wouldn't the message here then be that what should these false teachers who have eyes full of adultery and all of this other things that they're getting these Christians to kind of to accept, enticing these Christians with, what should they expect to be their end? Well, it's nothing good. Didn't end well for Balaam. It's not going to end well for them. And so the example of Balaam demonstrates the arrogance, the corruption, the spiritual blindness, and the absolute surety of divine judgment for these false teachers. Right? And Balaam, we suspect that Balaam was a very known, like even back then, like today, there's some Old Testament accounts that we know very well. Some are a little more obscure to us, right? But some we know very well. And so and I would think that it was the same way back then. These people, there were some Old Testament accounts that they knew very well. You know, like Sodom and Gomorrah kind of gets repeated over and over and over again throughout the Bible, right? So we know that very well. Balaam would have been an example to go back to show how awful maybe some certain sins are. So that's why Balaam was brought up. Does that make sense? Any questions about Balaam? Why we brought it up? Has anyone ever had a donkey talk to them before? No? Oh, you have? A donkey's talked to you?
Not to me.
Oh, okay. Sure. Dean, we'll talk to Dean later. Would you have a question though? Really?
No, I just had a comment.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I had written a note to myself about this verse that, the first thing that came to my mind was how stubborn Balaam was. That's what I think of when I think about donkeys and Balaam, his stubbornness. He was so stubborn, only a talking donkey could restrain his foolishness.
Okay, yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah, I guess stubbornness, surely that would be part of his madness, right? The madness of the prophet. Yeah, sure. Okay, verse 17. It gives a different imagery here now of these false teachers. Verse 17 says, "These are wells without water, clouds carried by a tempest, for whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever." Okay, so you get it? You get it? Can we move on? What good is what's you digging a well and it's got no water in it? How good is that gonna be for you? Okay, it's useless. So that's pretty much the gist of what he's saying about these false teachers. They're really no good. They don't do you any good. There's probably a deeper meaning here. Every time like wells or the word springs or fountains in the Old Testament, especially you see fountains of water. Usually this is usually in reference to God's wisdom. There's a lot of different places in the Bible, Proverbs, book of Jeremiah, book of Psalms, the book of Isaiah, all use examples of where we're talking about springs or fountains of water, and it's related to God's knowledge or God's wisdom or even God's word. In the New Testament, Jesus talks about to the Samaritan woman at the well in John 4 about her asking for living water. And of course, he's talking about himself. Jesus can give the living water. Revelation 21 talks about it as well. So I think there's a little bit more than just them being useless. Why they're useless is because they're not bringing this kind of water of life. They're not teaching with God's actual word. They're not teaching with God's wisdom. And if any teacher does that, then they are like wells without water. They are useless, right? That makes sense. And the same picture of uselessness is given with these clouds, or you might see the word mists. These are wells without water, mists carried by a tempest. A tempest, from what I understand, this is not an actual storm. It's almost like the appearance of a storm. So this tempest would be strong winds. And so these are kind of the winds and the clouds that only give the appearance that that rain is coming. They kind of promise rain, but no rain is actually coming. And so again, these teachers are no good. They are useless. They promise a lot, but they deliver nothing. The blackness of darkness doesn't sound very nice, nor does the word forever. The blackness of darkness forever. You think that has something to do with eternity? Perhaps a place in eternity? I think this is meant to reference the same place where the angels who sinned are, at least that. It's at least that, even if it's not about eternity. So you look in verse 4 of the same chapter, you notice the word reserved. Talks about chains of darkness there to be reserved for judgment. And then we have over here reserved, verse 17, reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Surely it's meant to connect to the clouds that look good but don't give rain. Maybe the idea is this, that the clouds that look good but they don't give rain to the people who need it, which would be the people who the false teachers are enticing and fooling and tripping up and tricking and all of that to sin. Soon enough, though, those clouds do turn into a storm, and it's a storm of the worst kind, and these false teachers are going to be caught right in the very middle of it. Maybe that's the whole picture there. But regardless of us digging into it like that, and that really didn't go much too deep into it, I think we can understand verse 17. Anybody have any comments? Perfect. Y'all are already looking forward to tomorrow, aren't you? Well, the eating part anyways, I'm sure. All right, verse 18 and 19 says, for when they speak great swelling words of emptiness, they allure through the lusts of the flesh, through lewdness, the ones who have actually escaped from those who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are slaves of corruption. For by whom a person is overcome, by him also he is brought into bondage. So there's some differences in the translations here. I'm trying to bring a couple of those out. So look, Christians, people who've obeyed the gospel, they learn to be good people. Maybe they're already good people, but they learn to be better people. And so I think Christians do, I think generally speaking, for the most part, want to trust people. And you want to believe in people. So I want to trust this person that I just met, and I expect, for them to trust me, and then, a good relationship can form. And I think that's, I think that fits very well with Christianity, the whole idea, the whole worldview of Christianity. Right? We have in 1 Corinthians 13 where it says, love believes all things. And I think that has a lot to do with that. Love believes all things. Like, I believe all things until I'm proven otherwise, especially about a person. But if Christians are not careful, and they kind of just stumble headlong into trusting everybody, which I guess, inherently is not bad, but it does leave a Christian open to attacks, sort of. You know what I mean? Kind of leads them, it kind of exposes them to people who might, who are not so nice as they are trying to be nice. And it kind of leaves them open to being taken advantage of and things like that. And this is, I would imagine that this is what's going on here with these false teachers and these Christians. And of course, you see somebody, and first impressions do mean something, right? And you might get a good first impression off someone or something, and but they're not. First impressions aren't everything, right? First impressions can be deceiving, misleading, and so So Christians need to be wise. We need to be wise in our judgments. Proverbs 14:15 says, the simple believes every word, but the prudent, or like the cautiously wise person, considers well his steps. I think that fits with what I'm saying here. So you see the word allure, and we talked about that last class, where it's the idea of baiting and hooking, right? So the bait looks really good, and I really want that thing. I like that, you know. And then, boom. But that's the idea. That's how these false teachers are doing it. They're baiting and hooking. They're alluring these Christians. So again, they're promising something good. And here he's saying they're promising, in verse 19, they're promising liberty, which is another word you would say liberty is what? Okay, they're promising freedom. But they can't deliver. They can't promise freedom. Now, this kind of freedom, this liberty, surely has to do with final judgment, final things. Because, I mean, if it's not that kind of freedom from judgment from our sins, freedom from acting in whatever way we want, right? If that's not it, then what do you think? What other kind of liberty would he be talking about here in this context? I mean, what sounds more enticing? What could possibly sound more enticing to so many people than the idea that you can believe and act in whatever way you want to act and still go to heaven? That's pretty enticing, don't you think? Why do you think so many people believe that? Well, they at least live that way. Probably wouldn't say that. So yeah, we're there. So they promised liberty. They promise, don't worry. God is not going to judge you for acting through all your desires, acting out all your desires to the nth degree. Blowing a bunch of hot air, we would say, right? Know anybody like that? But hot air can be bad. Hot enough air can be bad, right? And so they were dragging people into spiritual slavery. You see that, verse 19? They themselves are slaves of corruption. They're dragging people into spiritual slavery, spiritual corruption, dragging them right into sin that they themselves like to practice. And they're losing their souls. These Christians are losing their souls right along with the people who are saying, we can do whatever we want. I mean, imagine being in prison and your cellmate is saying something like, I can get you out of here. I know I'm in the same spot you are, but don't trust me. I can get you out of here if you would just do X, Y, and Z for me. And you would just trust him. You would think, this guy probably knows what he's talking about. How's he going to get you out of there when he's in the same spot? And this is the idea of the false teachers. How are they going to promise them liberty when they're going down the path where they're slaves to sin themselves? It's the same idea in Galatians chapter number 5. So you look at Galatians chapter 5 and verse number 1 says that there's liberty in Christ. Liberty in Christ, not liberty in what these false teachers were offering and the lifestyle that they were saying was okay and join us in, that kind of thing. Galatians 5:1 says, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. We're going to see that language in just a second. This idea of being entangled again. So I think, well, I mean, what do you think? The concern of Peter, is the concern of Peter so far that you've picked up on, is he angry? Is he more showing his anger towards these false teachers about what they're doing? Or is Peter showing more concern that some Christians are getting taken by this? What do you think? Are you reading how angry Peter is, or are you reading how more concerned he is about the church? What do you think? Or you got a third option?
Concern.
Okay, you say concern. Who wants to second that? Okay, they were doing it. They were doing it, Eddie. They were saying, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure he was angry. I mean, haven't you ever felt some kind of anger and mad about false teaching in some way, or maybe someone you love is believing this thing? I have. It gets me pretty mad.
Especially when you think they should know better.
Especially when you think they should know better. Wait, what? Go ahead.
I had a cousin that was married to this guy, and he was a Baptist preacher, and they just thought he was just almost Billy Graham.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
Mm.
They put him right up there with Billy Graham,
Yeah.
and all he was well, he was a wolf anyway, but he was a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Mm-hmm.
and he spewed all this stuff out, got everybody to believe him. But what it was, he was evil, and they didn't. My aunt did, and the rest of them found him out after my cousin died. What kind of man he really was.
Oh, yeah.
But he had a lot of followers, because they just listen and they just, he's just the best thing in the world,
Yeah. And I guess his true side came out later.
His true side came out real bad.
Aside from the fact that he was teaching false doctrine.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like very charismatic people. I guess, there's some people who could really pull the wool over. That's probably where that comes, pull the wool over our eyes.
Well, he had pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Even, some of my family.
Yeah. That's a
But
shame.
my grandmother, she used to say, she didn't believe anything he said.
Oh, yeah.
And she said she told him he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. She
Mm.
don't believe nothing he says. She never did believe it. She
Yeah.
didn't like him. But she was right about it.
Yeah, so sometimes, and I'm not saying that Peter wasn't angry about all of this happening, but I think, to those of you who answered, I think I would agree with you that you're seeing more concern about the damage that these false teachers are causing for the church and for these Christians. Now, you really got to keep in mind, I bet, if you didn't read 2 Peter much, I would guess that you didn't really, a lot of people don't know that this bondage that he's talking about here, this slaves of this corruption, that word corruption, and then brought into bondage, it's concerned with sexual sins, sexual immorality. And we might go to other places in the New Testament to, see that kind of thing. But this was what the false teachers were presenting to the church. It's about the lust of the flesh, lewdness, or that wantonness, lasciviousness, this adultery, the verse 14, is it 14? The 13, the carousing, right? These unbridled parties, actions, this reveling, That's what this is about. It's not about like just coming out and saying something like, oh, Jesus never resurrected. I mean, I think that probably part of it. There's some ideas in the next chapter we're going to get to, some like actual doctrinal stuff, but it's really about just giving in to the human desires, this desire for worldly pleasures, sexual immorality. It's what this is all about. It's what these teachers are bringing in. It's a big deal. And this is a big part of the more complete picture of the sin that is in our world right now, today, and man has always lived in this kind of sin. I mean, y'all see it, right? You see that the world is wrapped up in that more than probably, I don't know, is it arguably more than anything? I mean, look at what is causing people oh man, I want to get too off the point, but all right, I'm just gonna, y'all know it. Y'all can see it for yourself. How a little bit of sexual sin here leads to like unbelievable ideas and thoughts that involve sex. Borderline insane stuff. So, and here it is, way back when, creeping into the church. Okay, any comments or thoughts? Did you have one?
Just a thought that I feel like this 2 Peter is, I call it the strongly worded letter. I feel like this is a strongly worded letter against the false teachers and just
like no punches pulled kind of thing.
Not pulling punches, just making it plain. Like it's, reserve the blackness of darkness for forever for these people. Like
I mean, how else is it? Yeah.
It doesn't. I can't really think of anything.
Yeah. Think of another way to make that more serious, right? You can't do it. Yeah, definitely that way. Worded that way. All right, so 2021 says, for if after so we're talking about the same people, they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome. The latter end is worse for them than the beginning. For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. Now, you might, be examining that sentence, and is that the false teachers, or is that talking about the Christians who are kind of buying into their false doctrine? I would say I think it's the teachers, but it doesn't really matter. The subject there most certainly are Christians. Okay, so whether it could be both of them. If you want to play the what do you call it? The antecedent game where you go backwards. Figure out who they're talking about. It doesn't matter. They're Christians, and so that's what I want you to focus on there. So, and why I'm going to do what I'm about to do in the next 6 minutes, maybe next time, I don't know, probably not next time, but is because this is a big deal in what people believe about, as Marshall brought up, once saved, always saved. So what once saved, always saved is. If you don't, it means that once you've asked Jesus to come into your heart and you truly meant it, then there's nothing you can do to be lost. Like, you're definitely going to heaven. You might have a rough life because you're falling into sin and this and that, and you're not being faithful, but you're definitely not lost. And you might sin in such a way where you won't get the big rewards in heaven, but you're definitely still going to heaven. That's the idea. That's once saved, always saved. Well, so we just needed to harmonize. That idea sounds, it doesn't sound wonderful, but I guess in some minds it sounds wonderful. But how does that harmonize with this passage? That's what we want to know. So we're looking at, and I cannot find this, but I have reached out to a certain popular website and I asked them about this passage, and they responded to me with basically saying like, well, these false teachers. First, they said it was false teachers that it's talking about here, not talking about Christians who would be following the false teachers. But these false teachers, they were never Christians to begin with. That's basically the sum of their answer. Like, well, they were almost there, but they hadn't like actually fully accepted. Like Jesus they were almost Christians.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So let's see if that fits. So, and they didn't deep dive they didn't address hardly anything. But so after they have escaped the pollutions of the world. Okay. Does that sound like a person who has almost escaped, or like, is this just saying that this person has escaped the pollutions of the world? They're no longer in the pollution. Or are they like 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of thing? Well, that's what you would want to ask yourself. I think it's important to be glancing back over to chapter 1, 3, and 4 for this. So if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world, chapter 1 and verse 4 says, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. And who's that talking about? He's addressing the church. He's definitely talking about Christians there, right? So over here, is that same phraseology? Is it not describing the very same people or the very same escaping from the world? It's got to be. Look at you escape the world, pollutions of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And if you look at chapter 1 and verse 3, he's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who has called us. If chapter 1, 3, and 4 is describing the situation of a person who is committed to Christ, and there's no website that would deny that. I don't think. If 1, 3, and 4 is talking about a person who is truly committed to Christ, and it is, how in the world does chapter 2, 20 and 21, that's using the same language, how is that describing someone who is not committed to Christ? I'm saying it's not. Or why would Peter confuse us, and why didn't he use different kind of language? You're talking about Christians over here, you're talking about non-Christians here, but you're using the same language. Thank you for confusing us, Peter. Or thank you for very clearly laying it out for us. That wouldn't say always like Christians can't fall away, go back into the pollution, I guess we say. Eddie.
Would 1 John 4:10 fit in there?
Maybe, what's it say?
By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not have love for another. So, I mean, if you weren't,
if you're practicing, whether you've been a Christian or not, if you're practicing sin, you're definitely not saved. You're not. You couldn't be considered a saved child of God.
takes you out of the running there if you're willingly
Mm-hmm.
living in sin, knowing, to
Right. Yeah. So if chapter 1, here's what I'm saying, if chapter 1, 3, and 4 is describing a Christian, then chapter 2, 20 and 21 is describing a Christian. And these two passages in chapter 1 and chapter 2, they're not to be read in ignorance of each other. You can't just, I think they need to be read together to really get what's going on here. And both of these passages, 1, 3, and 4, and 2, 20, and 21, they set up the proverb that follows in verse 22, which we haven't read yet. All right, we'll say a little more about this next week. We're gonna really want to hit it home, because this is, if you're gonna come across, you're gonna have any kind of discussion. And I know some of you have actually had this discussion with people, because you told me that you have, this idea of once saved, always saved. Like, you cannot get around that language in this passage. You cannot do it. You cannot just say, oh, well, they were never Christians to begin with, without giving me something that makes that answer make sense. Cannot do it. And so we're not just going over this because, oh, we want to just get over on, we want to make sure we want to teach people the right way. Well, we're not just trying to show people that they're wrong, but it really, the big once saved, always saved problem just might be in the church, because of the way Christians think that they can live and still go to heaven, because it's almost like, what do you say? Oh, like once you've been baptized, then it's once saved, always saved. That is how people act in the church sometimes. And that is not scriptural. It's not right. All right. I don't mean to leave on such a negative note, but we'll pick it up next week. Hope you have a good Thanksgiving.